be talking about what it means to be a sovereign citizen as opposed to a corporation. And we're going to hopefully learn a little bit about how much are the corporations truly running our lives. I think you'll be very, very surprised. So Bruce, take it away.
Thanks, Elle. And I do want you all to know that we have a sign up in the back that says "Kikikly out," and if you sign up on that, oh, it's being passed around, great. So if you sign up on that, you'll be apprised of what's going on board that spotlight. I don't know. We wanted to get the spotlight so that we didn't have the light on the screen, and we've done that. But I'm sorry, I won't be able to see you as well as I would prefer. But we do have to have the screen dark, because this is largely a multimedia presentation. So how many of you are familiar with the idea that there's something going on in our government systems, and this is actually worldwide, but here in the United States, specifically we're talking about tonight, there's something going on in our government systems which we don't really know about. There's a set of rules that are underneath the surface, that are hidden, and that people are really being driven into something which is a modern equivalent of slavery because of this system. Can I see the hands of people who are roughly familiar with a little bit of that? Okay, a little bit. This is something that you can spend your life in front of your computer screen researching. And still be wondering what's going on. And one of the things I'm going to try to get to tonight is that this is more than simply a process of knowing what the details are and finding out how to change the rules. It's also a process of understanding who we ourselves are and standing in our sovereignty. When we know that we are free, we're not going to accept any other alternative. Okay, so let me get this PowerPoint going.
How did we go from a people who were living in a Norman Rockwell painting like you saw everywhere when I was a kid to people who were living in the streets? It's not easy to figure out. Our kids are still told that we're living in a country that was created by people who were dedicated to freedom, dedicated to creating a system in which anyone could be president and had constitutional rights.
But it says here, Canada is a parliamentary democracy and a constitutional monarchy. Yeah, whatever. This means Canadians recognize the Queen as our head of state. Canada's Governor-General carries out Her Majesty's duties in Canada on a daily basis and is Canada's de facto head of state. Does everybody know what de facto means? Illegitimate but in effect.
So it has no legitimacy, but because we've all accepted it, that gives it force and effect. Now, as soon as you get away from all the people and you remove yourself or segregate yourself through a private agreement or what have you, that becomes private. Now, the Governor General and the Queen, by definition, are only responsible for the public.
Government is there to deal with the public for us, but they've turned everything public. As soon as you register property like land or vehicles or any of that kind of stuff, you turn that into a registered item which is in the public.
If you're in the public, they assume that you're vulnerable and that you need protecting from others and from yourself.
As soon as you're using all of your corporations, that's all on the public side, and that's all governed by the public, which is the government.
So part of the process that I went through was to actually explicitly say, I do not want to be governed.
This is the fundamental rule of all forms of law. Without your consent, you cannot be governed. There is not a single law in existence created by man that is mandatory. There are many that give the illusion of being mandatory, but therein lies the most important aspect to all of this. It is your responsibility to investigate and understand what governs you. Not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, consciously, and spiritually. There are tyrannical governments that force their law upon the people unjustly. Some do not have much of a choice to move away from these areas. However, most do have a choice, yet allow justifications to keep them exactly where they are. If we were on a train track just minutes away from being hit, most of us would move, yet some have the tendency to complain about how inconvenient it is to move. There is still a choice. Human ingenuity can surmount any obstacle. The only requirement is the desire to surmount. If we are willing to complain or rebel against the system that governs our actions, we should know how and why it does so. In doing this, it is important to understand who we are, where we are, and what options we have.
One of the key aspects of this whole occult system, or hidden, occult means hidden. It is an occult system. One of the key aspects is a little thing that's called your legal fiction, or your straw man, your straw person. The government now is entirely composed of corporate structures, and everything is done on the basis of contract. Contract is a special word. Contract does not mean an agreement. I made a contract with him. Well, you're erroneous when you say that. A contract is not an agreement. A contract is a particular kind of an agreement between corporate entities. So in order for these corporate structures to have agreements with us and to govern us when they're not actually governing bodies, they have to create a legal fiction for us that we believe is us.
The government. It loves you and wants to keep you safe and well. It even wants to make paying taxes, fines, and court costs easier for you. How? Well, you'll need to meet your straw man. He was born the same day you were. He looks like you, has the same name, and lives in your house, but you never knew he existed. You will have even paid his parking tickets or taxes. The worst part? He's been dead from day one. From every birth certificate, a legal personality, or legal fiction, is created with the same name to confuse little old you into thinking it's you. So, there is a human you and a paper you, or as it's commonly known, a straw man. So when it seems like government officials, court clerks, or the police are speaking English, they aren't. They're speaking legalese, designed to make you agree to verbal and written contracts without even knowing about it, all spun from Black's Law Dictionary. For example, when the police say, "Do you understand?" you'll say, "Yes." What they are really saying is, "Do you stand under our authority?" Oops-a-daisy, you just created a verbal contract with them. Oh, you clever government. Did you know that whenever you register something, you are handing over title to the person you register it with? That's right. Whenever you register something with the government, they assume it belongs to them. Registered your car? Super! Now you are the registered keeper of your vehicle, and the government can crush it when you don't pay your, straw man's taxes. Expecting a new bundle of joy? Well then you need to register your little darling with a birth certificate. Then they can start the process all over again and create a new straw man for your little one. Isn't that great? So when Junior grows up, he'll be able to generate revenue just like you have. When you notify on your baby by signing the birth certificate, your child becomes a ward of state, and if the government doesn't like what you're doing, they'll assume it's okay to take the child away, or make new rules for things they don't like. Not enough school? Smacking your child? Shouting too loudly? Then it's off to social services for the little one. When you get a bill, It's sent to you, but belongs to your straw man, not you. That's why bills, fines, and summons start with Mr., Mrs., or Ms. Sometimes you'll see your surname in capitals, just like on a gravestone. That's because your straw man is dead, and just a silly piece of paper, created before you could comprehend or even consent to it. When you go to court, you represent your straw man, so you, the human, take on any costs, fees, taxes, and fines involved for the straw man. The human you doesn't even need to pay them. But you made a contract with the court by appearing on behalf of your legal personality or straw man, just like the government knew you would. Confused? Well, don't worry. The government doesn't want you to know anyway. If you knew, you'd stop paying things like council tax and parking tickets. Because when you go to court, you are representing your straw man. You are you, alive and made of flesh and blood. Your straw man, or legal personality, is a piece of paper created from your birth certificate. And you think it's you. What a silly Billy. Would you like to know more? Well, then go over to tpuc.org. Get up, get informed, and get real.
Physical enough, it seems like, well, that's very highly theoretical. Here is a 30-second spot, official government advertisement from the government of Ontario.
I've come a long way, kept my feet on the ground, but the best of this love is still left to come around.
Every transaction with the Ontario government is a part of your story. And now, there are more ways to connect at every turn. Just click, call, visit a kiosk or a center. We're at your service, Ontario.
Are they trying to tell us something? When we interface with the legal system, generally we're completely buffaloed. We don't know anything about the truth of this. This stuff seems very, very confusing. So of course, we're going to avail ourselves of a legal expert. Because we all know there is a maxim, there are a lot of maxims under law. There's a maxim that says, he who represents himself in court has a fool for a client. But this is from the Corpus Juris Secundum, CJS Legal Encyclopedia. This is used by lawyers and judges all over the Western world. Attorney and client. The attorney's first duty is to the courts and to the public, not to the client. And wherever the duties to his client conflict with those he owes as an official officer of the court, officer is a special word too, in the administration of justice, the former, that is to say his duties to his client, must yield to the latter. The office of attorney is indispensable to the administration of justice. What? That's a doctor of jurisprudence. But when you take the bar and you assume your role as an attorney in society, you take an oath to the bar, which is a society. It's a particular society of people. And it's actually a society that pretends that everybody in the entire country is a member of it. And their law, I mean the oath that they take to this society supersedes every other oath they take, including their oath to the Constitution, for instance. A client is one who applies to a lawyer or counselor for advice and direction and commits his cause to his management in prosecuting a claim or defending against a suit in a court of justice. One who retains the attorney as responsible to him for his fee, and to whom the attorney is responsible for the management of the suit. One who communicates the facts to an attorney expecting professional advice. Clients are also called wards of the court in regard to their relationship with their attorneys. Wards of the court. That's interesting. What could that possibly mean? Wards of the court. Infants and persons of unsound mind placed by the court under the care of a guardian. This is from multiple court rulings. Do you want to challenge the jurisdiction you're in? Challenging the jurisdiction you're being prosecuted in is one of the most powerful techniques for not getting railroaded into the for-profit prison system. But if you want to do that, the only way you can do that is by representing yourself. If you are represented by an attorney, the fact that you're represented by an attorney indicates that you've already admitted jurisdiction before the attorney even begins to work for you in court. And the attorney is proud to make a plea for you, and a plea has special meanings as well. You're a ward of the court and a second-class citizen. You're assumed to be incompetent. You're assumed to need the help of the government, and the government will also step in and take care of your estate for you. They will take care of your financial relationships. They will take care of your children. You can't hire an attorney if you want to challenge jurisdiction. If you want to challenge jurisdiction, the only way you can do it is a sui juris and or in propria persona.
Well, what's Canada defined as? In the Interpretation Act, Canada, for greater certainty, includes the internal waters of Canada and territorial sea of Canada. Okay? Now that word includes is a tricky word. There's a legal maxim that says the inclusion of one is the exclusion of all others. Okay, so whenever you see the word includes, it means it's this and nothing else. Hold on here. You're trying to tell me that Canada is just water? Yes, it is. This red, that's Canada. We, sitting in this basement, we are not in Canada.
Well, the term Turtle Island, my understanding, is an actual word that the First Nations people called North America. When the Europeans came over, they then started putting their own terms and words to the land. However, it was all done through corporations.
Well, that's why they need the Admiralty courts, because Canada is only water. You can't have law of the land if you have no land. You need Admiralty courts to operate in Canada because it's all water. You need your ships. Everybody know where they fly the flag on the Parliament buildings in Ottawa? On the top of the Peace Tower, because they don't have any land to plant their flag. You need land to plant a flag. Take a look at the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. You type in the word Canada, it's listed there. Canada actually has to file with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission every year.
The Admiralty courts are set up to govern business between corporations, not people. The jurisdiction of Admiralty courts does not deal with human affairs. Only when humans, knowingly or unknowingly, represent a corporation by using licenses, registrations, certificates, and applications do they fall under Admiralty jurisdiction. It is a well-disguised fact that nearly everything we believe to be our country, our courts, our police departments, and even the documents that represent us as individuals are in fact corporations in the business for profit. Should you choose to remain a part of any of these corporations, it's important to understand that not only are you under their jurisdiction, but you do gain the benefits that they offer. The benefits in the agreement of becoming a citizen of any country is their protection. To be a citizen of any nation means that you have your citizenship. This ship is a vessel that contains your consent to be protected and governed by that nation.
Those are the benefits, and almost all of us, whether we admit it or not, or notice or not, are completely strung out on the idea that we are going to be supported by this culture. We are going to get to a retirement age. We're going to retire. We're going to live on Social Security. We're going to have socialized health care. And we don't know what form it's going to be in. And it's becoming pretty plain that what they're getting ready to provide us is actually a form of a soft kill. But most people assume, or at least hope against hope, that somehow it's going to work out for them. So, this is from an article by a guy named Clint Richardson, who lives in Salt Lake, and he's got some wonderful stuff. We've got some links to him in our link document you can pick up. He discovered when this occurred, he was totally shocked. They announced that this man here, who was the duly elected sheriff of Salt Lake County, had stopped being the sheriff of Salt Lake County and instead become the CEO of the Greater Salt Lake Unified Police Department and the Salt Lake Valley Law Enforcement Service Area, which is a special financing district. He actually said in his campaign that we do not levy any taxes for our new police department. And he was telling the truth, kind of, speaking out of the side of his mouth, because the people who were enforcing the new fees, which were on top of everything that already paid for all of the police, all of the sheriff's department, were enforced by the special financing district. And the special financing district issued fees, and you could ignore the fees, but then they came to collect the fees and they attached those fees to people's property tax. And if you did not pay the fees with the property tax, they can, and they did, issue liens against people's property and foreclose on their homes. So how did this privatization happen? In 1996, the Utah Highway Safety Office and the Salt Lake Sheriff's Office met to talk about the problems encountered in law enforcement agencies. The Salt Lake County Multi-Agency Task Force, this is one of those cogs. It was participated in by the Salt Lake County and by all of the municipalities, and it was under the auspices of the state Highway Safety Department. They all got together and they created this deal. And it was 14 years later that they finally pulled the switch and killed the actual sheriff's department and created this for-profit private police department. It is a mercenary agency. The Salt Lake County Council acted in what capacity? What was their jurisdiction and their right to do this? And incorporated both the Unified Police Department and the Special Financing District. The Special Financing District was created long before the activation of the Police Department as a strategy of the joint actions of the Sheriff's Department, the Highway Safety Office, and the Salt Lake County Council, and also all the municipalities which closed up all their police departments and rolled them into this unified police agency. There are private partners who specialize in helping governments form these special financing districts. These special financing districts are another layer of quasi-government that's happening from coast to coast, and they have this company here, the California Special Districts Association. They would be glad to help you form such a district in your jurisdiction to help your population. For profit. They're a public-private partner, just like Barry Swenson is a public-private partner who gets to write his own ticket for the Stack'em and Pack'em housing in Aptos. This is from Manta.com. They get their information directly from Dun & Bradstreet. The Unified Police Department of Greater Salt Lake is a private company categorized under police departments. And the sheriff, Clint Richardson, actually got an interview with the sheriff in which the sheriff admitted that it's a private for-profit company. Special financing districts are corporate entities, imaginary shells, just like your straw man, created and run outside of public accountability. They are given power to assess fees, which if not paid, essentially become taxes through liens on your house, which you don't actually own. That's another one. Michael Shaw is now working on actualizing a loyal title here in California, which means true title of your property. If you have true title of your property, they cannot take your house because of non-payment of property taxes. So this is a new layer of government that's been created, and it's happening under our noses. The people who participated most in it, most of them have no idea what they're even in. But it's just like the Soviet system in Russia. The Soviets were appointed commissions of people who were just there to go along with the decisions which had already been made at a higher level. So SFDs are found in U.S. states and counties all over the country. Many counties have a dozen to 20 or more special financing districts in their county. These special service and tax districts are incrementally taking over our government one function at a time, like a pie chart. Of course, government can't do anything. They're all incompetent. We need private companies. Traditional government is disappearing. Let's say traditional government has disappeared. This special district scheme plays out across the country. And to take over America's infrastructure, it's actually literally being sold to these companies. And public departments happens one area at a time. In our own county, the last two sheriffs have been appointed on the retirement of the previous sheriff, roughly a year before the expiration of his term. Though they seem to be officially elected, there is evidence that they are actually officers in a private corporation. The Sheriff's Department is a private corporation. It has to be because of the nature of the court system, which is all about contracts. The laws that they're enforcing are not real laws that benefit or protect people. They're agreements that take place occultly, in a hidden way in the courtroom. Lower level sheriff's office also seem to be on the boards of this corporation/district. So here we go. The County of Santa Cruz. This is from Manta also. County of Santa Cruz, Sheriff Coroner. The County of Santa Cruz in Santa Cruz, California is a private company categorized under sheriff. The county is a corporation categorized under sheriff. Our records show it was established and incorporated in California. Here we have another business service on the internet, BizFind. And here it reports on the county sheriff. And it says here that one of the people involved is a principal, Jeremy Verinsky. Well, principal is a corporate board title. Jeremy Verinsky, principal of the County of Santa Cruz. Also noted over here are Steve Robbins and Mark Tracy, two former sheriffs, and Lieutenant Robbins, LTN Robbins, director, another corporate title. Here's Lieutenant Robbins. Here's the contacts under him. Lieutenant Robbins, director. Steve Robbins and Mark Tracy. There's some kind of a board. It's quite possible that the previous sheriffs are still on this board. This is all I asked the spokesperson for Sheriff Warwack about this directly, and he said this is all just nonsense. Here's a domain registration for fcsheriff.com. fcsheriff.com. That's not a government domain. And the administrative contract is Lieutenant Robbins of the Santa Cruz County Sheriff's Office. So here's Lieutenant Jeremy Verinsky. This is from the Santa Cruz Sentinel. Verinsky, 40, has been with the Sheriff's Office for 14 years. He has had positions in crime scene investigation, as a patrol deputy, field training officer, school resource officer, SWAT team member, firearms instructor, supervisor, and investigator. Blah, 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 blah. This reads almost identical to the information that was put out about Phil Wowak at the time that he was appointed as the current sheriff. Wowak was also brought up, and at a certain point in his career, they put him through all the agencies in the sheriff's department so that he had experience in all of the different departments. And that's what's going on with Verinsky. Upon promotion, Verinsky will be assigned to the Sheriff's Correction Bureau, Main Jail. Wowak also was the head of the jail. Other corporate government in Santa Cruz. Santa Cruz County Board of Supervisors is a business that provides services related to business management. So we would suspect that the Board of Supervisors is actually at least part of a corporate board. And who does that board represent? Who are the shareholders? We'll get into later, these organizations actually hold massive, billions, and in the United States, trillions and trillions of dollars worth of investment property. Beyond the land that they own shares in corporations. So now we're going to talk about a little thing called the CAFR.
Good morning. What we're going to be talking about today is what I've called the biggest game in town. My name is Walter Burian. I live in Prescott, Arizona. I became aware of something approximately 10 years ago, which changed my life. I'll give you a little analogy of how I learned about the complete financial takeover of the wealth of this country by composite government. Back in 1989, I lived in New Jersey. There was a governor by the name of Jim Florio who was running for office under a no new tax platform. He won, and as soon as he got into office, a $2.8 billion tax increase was enacted, the largest in the state's history. It's obvious that the public was not too thrilled about Mr. Florio's actions, and one of the local radio stations, 101.5 FM, started doing some rabble-rousing, taking calls from listeners on examples of waste and misspending in government. The first 2 days I was listening, and I heard people calling in with examples of 5,000, 15,000, 85,000 was the highest figure I heard. I pulled out the state of New Jersey's budget report, which is the only thing I was aware of at that time. They had $11 billion on budget, $6 billion off budget. The total annual service budget was $17 billion a year. I called into the show and I made the comment, come on guys, you're missing the whole point. The highest figure I heard was 85,000. The state's dealing with billions of dollars. I read off the figures. I said if there's fraud, waste, and misspending taking place, it's taking place on tunes of tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. The DJ at that time challenged us, the listeners, to start a tax protest organization to repeal the $2.8 billion tax increase. 10 of us got together the next day. I incorporated a group called Hands Across New Jersey. We scheduled our first rally 10 days out from that point, and basically, with the help of 101.5, we had 115,000 people converge on Trenton from all the shore points in New Jersey, effectively shutting the city down. Now, during the course of organizing that rally, I took over looking at the budget, revenue, and finance of the state. And I have been approximately, for about 15 years, I was a commodity trading advisor. I was one of the first tenants of the World Trade Center back in 1979. And large figures did not bother me. $100 million and $1, there was no difference. So when I started looking at the figures on the New Jersey budget report, as I mentioned, there were $11 billion on budget, $6 billion off budget. It showed a net available of $25.6 billion. But then I asked myself the number one question that IRS asks in an audit: what are the cash gross receipts? And I started noticing the large cash cow groups in state government, the New Jersey Turnpike, Garden State Parkway, Port Authority, New York, New Jersey. The revenue was not inclusive in the budget report. I didn't see any large returns from investment funds on the budget report. And I said, they have to have two sets of books here. They're not accounting for the whole picture. The director of the budget at that time was an individual by the name of Richard Keevy. He was on vacation till the following Tuesday of that week. I found out who his lower assistant was, called in, and the conversation went just like this. I said, "Hi, this is Walter Burian. I'm working on a report for Richard. I have to have it done by Tuesday when he gets back from vacation. I need all the figures on the autonomous agency accounts, interest accounts, investment accounts." And the reply I got was, "Oh, you want the comprehensive annual financial report." Bing. First time I ever heard that before in my lifetime. Got it that Friday. Started crunching numbers. It showed total liquid investment funds of $188 billion. $188 billion. Of which common stock ownership $70 billion, on loan to public and private corporations $10 billion, insurance company equity participation $14 billion, on loan to public and private corporations $10 billion, and I started looking for the total cash gross receipts, as I mentioned, what IRS would ask for in an audit. I found it on page 174. Now this is 1989's Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. On page 174 under cash additions, all agencies, all departments, all sources. Here's a state with a declared service budget of $17 billion who was bringing in $86,799 million in cash.
So that's the whole thing on YouTube. It's over 2 hours. This is the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report of the County of Santa Cruz. The Comprehensive Annual Financial Report is a property of a corporation. It's a corporate document. That's why all these governments have to have these documents, because they have to do business with corporations, so they have to be corporations. They're not representatives of the people, which is what an actual governing structure would be. So I went through this. It's a PDF. You can download it off their website. The one for 2011 is not out yet. It'll be out in June. This is, I did see an example of a lot of CAFRs online, and it looks to me like the Santa Cruz County CAFR is extremely sanitized, and I would suggest that, in fact, they're hiding a lot of stuff, because they're, according to the rules that govern them, they're supposed to report on every investment that they have in a publicly traded company, and there's none of that information in the CAFR. But they do show that the total assets of the county are $852 million. And yet they just cut the pay for home care workers who are getting $10 an hour. Because we're in such dire straits because of the economy. Okay, this is the guy from TPUC, John Harris, who we saw his video at the Christmas party last month.
Now there's a little trick goes on with this. It's quite clever. Because if they put an act through, which they did the Terrorism Act is a classic example, terrorism, well, I'll talk about that in a little bit later, because something very significant about it. When they put an act through, they don't have to enact every part of the act. And have you ever read these things? Oh, dear. They're mind-boggling, absolutely. But they don't have to enact it. What they do is, they sneak in a statutory instrument every now and again and enact part of an act. The reason they do this is because once they put the act through, they don't have to pull it back through Parliament. It can just be enacted under a statutory instrument. So what you live under, mostly, is statutory instruments. But you just don't know what they are. Because in all the definitions I could find, and I've searched everywhere to find this, because I want to prove myself wrong, because that's the easiest, but it is a created, written, legal contract. It's contract. That's the point. I'd like you to remember that, because it's going to come back a little bit later on. So I looked at this so-called society that we live in. And I looked at the meaning of society, number of persons united together by mutual consent, which is very important, in order to deliberate, determine and act jointly for some common purpose. My friend, Mr. Gerrish, wherever he is, will be enlightening you on this later. But society basically really, all it really means is the socially dominant members of a community. The people who actually say, I'm better than you. because of my position, because of my status, because of the clothes I wear, because of the way I walk. Unbelievable. They really do believe it. I remember watching, me and my partner Heb were watching, what were we watching? Some Parliament thing, which was quite hilarious, because it's just like going to the theatre. We were watching it, and Hazel Blears was in the panel afterwards, and she said, I've got a lot of respect for the ordinary people. And I piped up, I'm about to swear, I piped up, who the fuck does she think she is? But it all revolves around this word, status. And there is no mistake that statute comes from the word status, I promise you. But I'll go into that a little bit later. The common purpose of our socially dominant members of our community is to maintain their social dominance off your backbone. And that is what's happening the world over. Okay? Doesn't matter, people tell me about New World Order and all this, and there's, yeah, okay, you believe in what you want to believe in. There's nothing, I can't tell you not to believe in nothing, and it's not for me to do. All I'm saying is the socially dominant members of the world want to maintain their social dominance, and the only way to do that is to keep you enslaved. And slavery is a harsh word, but it is the truth. And it's not about colour. It's not how we look, how we speak, or what we look like. Everybody in the world who is not the socially dominant is enslaved. But they are as well, and I'll explain that in a little bit. So we've got the socially dominant members. This is simply the Law Society. This is the society you belong to, but as a man or a woman, you're not a member. And I'll explain. So I looked at contracts. An agreement between two or more persons. There's that magic word, persons. That creates or modifies an existing relationship. There must be mutual consent by all parties. Otherwise the contract cannot exist. Cannot exist unless there's mutual consent. And this is very important. It's another thing I'm going to come back to. So I looked at a constitution, which John explained earlier, the way his take on it. And, you know, pretty much that's it, basically unwritten. John talked about the American Constitution, ours is unwritten. The reason I see ours is unwritten, because something that's not written down is easier to manipulate. Very simple. Very, very simple indeed. But see, the point is, a man or a woman is legally known as a thing. Did you know that? You're a thing. No, you are. You're a thing. That's what you're known as. Things. For nothing of substance, natural, and I presume you're all natural, can exist in the legal industry. The thing has to be given a legal personality. A legal person. A certified name. A man or a woman is not a member of this society. The certified name, the legal personality. The legal person is. This is all that is bound by the rules of this constitution of the Law Society, which is actually Anderson's constitution. Now, if you're into the Ministry of Funny Handshake stuff, have a look at Anderson's constitution. Makes fascinating reading. So what I've decided to do, and there's a lot of help from Richard, who sat in the audience, one of the admin, Hev, my partner, Dan, a lot of people have given us help about this, and the anti-terrorist again. This is actually what an Act of Parliament is defined as, a statute is defined as. And it's quite simple. It's a legislative rule of society given the force of law by the consent of the governed, as of a rule of a corporation. Now, as it says there, by its own definition, it tells you it's not law. It can be given the force of law if you agree. But it doesn't mean it's law, because it says it's not. This comes from the neuter of Latin, status, the legal character or condition of a person or thing that is actually a maxim. Do we know what a maxim is? Right, well, a maxim in law is an internationally recognised fact in law that cannot be disputed, rebutted, or even talked about. It is a fact. And maxims are very powerful. There's a lot of them that are good, and there's a lot that are bad. So if you are going to use maxims, just use the good ones.
So he was talking about person, and he was talking about Black's Law Dictionary. There are now 8 editions of Black's Law Dictionary. There's actually been a campaign recently in the last year to try to persuade people that Black's Law Dictionary was originally created as a joke. Although it is found in the office of every attorney anywhere in the British Commonwealth. But in any case, in the different iterations of this book, the words change. How can the words change? The definitions that the Law Society uses change over time. And now I just found this week doing research for this presentation that they have it at Black's Law Dictionary org. You can go there, you don't have to buy the darn thing, you know, it weighs a ton. You can go there and you can, it's really hard to use their interface. But in any case, you can find stuff. So I looked up person. A man considered according to the rank he holds in society, with all the rights to which the place he holds entitles him, and the duties which it imposes. Then it's a quote from Bouvier, another law dictionary. A human being considered as capable of having rights and of being charged with duties, while a thing is the object over which rights may be exercised. Well, we just heard John tell us that a thing is us, or as Hazel Blears was saying, the ordinary people, which she has a lot of respect for.
Yeah.
So, they're talking here about hierarchical rank, and they're also completely covering up the fictional nature of the corporation that the person represents.
Think of an aspect of your life that dictates the limits of your freedom. Government and law enforcement, insurance and pharmaceutical companies, taxes, building permits, driver's licenses, and more. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of stipulations, regulations, and boundaries on our freedom. And out of the ones that were just mentioned, how many have you researched to find out whether they apply to you or not? Let's look at the forms of law that we currently acquiesce to. A common misconception among people is that any rule or regulation that governs them falls under one category: law. But there are many other forms of law that people abide by without realizing that they simply do not apply to them. Another misconception is that a nation's constitution gives us our rights. A constitution does nothing more than list the rights that we already have. We are born with inalienable rights, endowed to us by our Creator. They are not given to us, and they cannot be given away. The most a person can do with a right is choose whether to exercise it or not. Maritime admiralty law is what's known as the law of the water. It is superseded by civil law and only applies to those who willingly contract themselves into it. The definition of admiralty law is a body of private international law governing the relationships between private entities which operate vessels on the oceans. Let's look at how and why a form of law that is fashioned to govern corporations, businesses, and vessels has imposed its rule over natural human beings. This is all done through a form of word magic. A simple perversion of language has made it possible to convince people around the world that these alternative laws apply to them. One of the predominant beliefs in modern culture is that licenses, permits, registrations, and other forms of documentation are required to operate motor vehicles, use public roads, build structures and establishments, engage in free enterprise, and much more. Sadly, these beliefs are based on little to no investigation whatsoever, and are false. This belief structure is perpetuated by maritime admiralty law. This form of law was originally created to govern ships docking in foreign nations for the import or export of products and resources. It deals with banking and merchant affairs, not civil affairs. When a product is taken off of a ship and brought into a foreign land, that nation takes custody of the resource and accounts for it with a certificate. That certificate marks the birth date of that product in the custody of the respective nation. Think of why it is supposedly required to have a certificate of live birth in the first place. The Barron's Dictionary of Banking Terms defines a certificate as a paper establishing an ownership claim. So right there, we notice that everyone with a birth certificate is defined as being owned. People are used as collateral with other nations because the U.S. is bankrupt. The United States declared bankruptcy on March 9th of 1933. At this point, the U.S. began taking out loans from a private, non-government affiliated corporation called the Federal Reserve. With no money to pay back the loans, the United States began using the citizens as collateral. All birth and marriage certificates are literally warehouse receipts. Just look at the similarities of warehouse receipts and birth certificates. Both document the date of issue, a serial number, registration number or receipt number, a description of the product, and an authorized informant to notify the appropriate government agency. With all of this information being readily available, the majority of people are unaware of their involvement with maritime admiralty law. This is possible through the manipulation of language. This admiralty law changed the meaning of the word person from a natural living person to a corporation. Driver's licenses, vehicle registrations, auto insurance forms, building permits, gun permits, work permits, tax filing documents, birth and death certificates, traffic citations, and many other forms of documentation that were once believed to be absolutely necessary only apply to persons or corporations. Upon signing such a legal document, you are indirectly waiving your rights under the Constitution and lowering your status to that of a corporation that is created with the same exact name as you. The only way to reconcile your true name from the name of the corporation is to take notice that the corporation has its name in all capital letters. This is known as capitis diminutia maxima. You may take notice that your driver's license, birth certificate, social security card, insurance cards, and more use all capital letters to legally represent the corporation with your name, not you. The corporation is known as an artificial person, whereas you, the human being, are known as a natural person. This deception goes even deeper when it comes to the courts that we attend. When showing up to court, you will notice that there are seats for witnesses behind a wooden fence or barrier. The defendant must cross through the entrance to the other side of the barrier where the plaintiff and judge sit. This act symbolizes the boarding of a ship. At this time, business can be conducted in maritime admiralty law. The judge, acting as captain or banker, is responsible for settling the balance between the two sides. This is why there is always a monetary value involved in any court case. The captain is simply dealing with banking and merchant disputes. Once the balance is paid, the case is closed. To turn the court case away from admiralty law where your rights are not protected, you must avoid agreeing to represent the artificial person. This is done by stating that you are the natural person. You don't have a first or last name because those imply corporate title. In a court case, you may state that the court takes judicial notice of your honor's oath of office. Every judge must take an oath of office to practice law. Yet you must make it clear to the court and the jury that the judge is acting as judge and not banker. Remember that you are a natural human being of the earth. You are not governed by anything but your own consciousness. Laws are created within a society. The society that created the laws we see being enforced today is called the Law Society. Yet the most beautiful part of this entire deception is the fact that we are not part of the Law Society, so their laws do not apply to us.
Judges, lawyers, and law enforcement officers, they're all part of a society. Within that society, they've created their own language that's deceptively similar to English. They have these little things called statutes, acts, and regulations that seem like laws, but they really only apply to those within their society. So that basically means all the traffic violations, minimum age requirements, and everything except for damage to another person or their property doesn't really apply to the natural person.
Laws only apply to those within the Law Society. The game being played is an illusion. You can simply choose to open your eyes and reclaim the freedom that you were born with, bound by nothing but the limits of your imagination. These are just a few examples of assuring that your rights are being protected. By far, the most important line of defense against this deception is to be aware of the perversion of language, and be absolutely aware of how you form your beliefs and concepts.
Okay, what we're going to see here is a guy up in Canada, as usual, where they seem to be doing a lot more of this than we are down here. This guy is going to do the best he can not to be enjoined to his legal fiction, the straw man, the artificial person. And we will see at the end that actually the judge cannot, I mean, in many cases the judges will abandon the courtroom rather than admit that they are now operating under their oath of office. If they're not operating under their oath of office, they're actually not the judge that you believe they are. They're actually operating in an entirely different capacity. And we will see what happens with this judge when this guy refuses to be real.
No. All right, sit down, please, sir. Just speak. All right, just which? Key. I'm here to correct a mistake by the court. I'm going to say. Well, first of all, if the court has made a mistake, are you Wilford Keith Thompson? No, that's not what I normally go by, no. Can I see the information? Petition affidavit in terms of person legally speaking, sir. I've tried to clarify this a few times, but apparently the level of the conflict. So your name is Keith Thompson? My name is Keith, that's all. Nothing more, nothing less. You don't have a last name, sir? I have a family name, clan name, but that's irrelevant today. So you are not Wilford Keith Thompson? Okay, one more time on and for the record, I am Keith. Nothing more. And sit down, sir. I'm looking for a Wilford Keith Thompson. Please sit down, sir. Actually, please sit down, sir. Sorry. Can't do that. I served into the court this morning. Sir, I'm looking for a Wilford Keith Thompson. You are not that this person. Sit down, sir. Bailiff, please remove this gentleman from the courtroom. Thank you. That's the person you're looking for. Please, sir, that is the person. I'm trying to remedy things. Touch me and you will be tried. I'm a peace officer. You want to dishonor a court official?
The defendant's on the bailiff's desk.
Sir, are you here on behalf of Mr. Thompson? I said I was the administrator to that account. Are you here as agent for him? Could you guys please back up? Thanks. Are you here as agent for him? Not as agent, as administrator, much like you are administrator of this court. Sir, you're either him or you are here as his agent. I'm speaking on his behalf. Are you either of those? Yes, it's awful. Pardon? He's in common law jurisdiction, which I established as soon as I came in here this morning and re-established again. The bailiff understood me. This other bailiff, wherever she went, she understood me as well. And this gentleman doesn't like talking. We're going to take a recess. Thank you.
Thank you. All rise.
How long? How long, sir? I don't have all day. Thank you. I have things to do.
We'll take the court.
Yeah, actually, please note that the judge has abandoned the court. He's abandoned ship, and I, as the sovereign in this room, claim authority, case dismissed, with cause and prejudice.
So you noticed what the judge did after he stood up to leave the court? He bowed quite distinctly. It's very obvious. He bowed to this guy who is the highest court official in this court because he has maintained his common law jurisdiction. The judge, in his role, actual role as a judge, is supposed to just adjudicate and make sure that things run smoothly. He is not supposed to be involved in what happens in the courtroom at all. And this judge, rather than take on his lawful role as the judge, abandoned the court. We can actually use our first and last names without being enjoined to the legal fiction, although it's a lot trickier because there is a necessity defense. Because society uses that as an interface or what's called a transmitting utility to deal with us, we have to use those names. You just can't function in society without it. And that is a legitimate defense that has been used successfully. But he said he is only Keith, And we don't even know that. I mean, let's just take 1 second and consider where our names came from. Was that who we were when we came out of our mother's womb? What is the consciousness that's inside of us? Is that the same as the name that was given to me? It's certainly not the same as the corporate entity that was created by the government in order to deal with us and to control us. And really what we are can't, no name can adequately convey what that is ever. So anyway, he refused to admit or agree that he was the first and last name. And the bailiff first used his first, middle, and last name, and then he used just his first and last name. Wait, maybe we'll get this applied. And he said, no. He said, well, do you have a last name? He says, well, I have a family name or a clan name, but that's irrelevant here. That's what he said. And he was the administrator for the account, for the estate that is attached to the legal fiction. And that makes him actually, it makes him the sovereign in the courtroom. What we actually are is sovereign. And that's where we're going. That's what we're moving toward understanding, is that we are a mystery force that came out of the universe. And we have our rights and dignity. I don't have the right to demand that somebody else pay me a fine or drive the way I want them to drive. How come somehow there's this governmental structure that has the right to do that to me?
Well, I think like I made a point too, when the judge said sit down, if he had followed that order and sat down, he would have been...
Well, actually it was the bailiff. It was the bailiff that was... Yeah, they tried... the bailiff was attempting to give him orders. He told him that you have to sit down now. A lot of times cops will tell you, get out of the car. If you accept an order from somebody acting in the administrative system, you have put yourself under their jurisdiction. Just like they will ask you if you understand. Oh, yeah, I understand. Oh, well, you're in my jurisdiction. And it's kind of a word game, and they never inform you as to what you've actually agreed to. They just, once they get what they think qualifies you as being their minion, they just go gangbusters, and they will put you in prison for an extended period if that's where they're going. Any other questions?
We've all heard of the chain of command. Usually people think of the term in the context of military, corporate, and government power structures. But in reality, all of modern society is implicated. The chain of command sounds powerful, and it imbues the officers, the bureaucrats, and the petty dictators of the world with a sense of importance and rank. The term is deceptive, and behind it is an open secret, hiding in plain sight. Power does not flow from the person who administers orders. A command is inconsequential if it's ignored or laughed at. Obedience is the real foundation of misplaced power. It is in fact the chain of obedience, not the chain of command, the cumulative force of cowardly and compliant citizenry which allows evil men to take control. Can you imagine how Napoleon Bonaparte would be treated today if he arrived in Times Square, New York, and attempted to order a man put to death? Chances are he'd probably end up heavily medicated in a padded room by the end of the day, but for a few minutes people would probably have a good laugh, and rightly so. Separated from those who've been trained to obey them, even the most bloody heads of state are hardly more dangerous than a pickpocket or a mugger. It may be true that we have a demented pack of inbred maniacs running the world right now, but they aren't the ones that I fear. I fear the conditioned masses, which would put me to death with a drop of a hat if the right order is given. I fear the herd of well-meaning idiots which believe that written law and authority is to be followed at all cost, even at the expense of self-evident morality. The death squads and the concentration camps of history were never staffed by rebels and dissidents. They were run by those who followed the rules. The problem isn't the chain of command. The problem is the chain of obedience.
a section from Kymatica.
In a similar way, Wilhelm Reich stated that whole societies suffer from a psychosis caused by starving our organic biological impulses. He states that sexual suppression supports the power of the church, which has sunk very deep roots into the exploited masses by means of sexual anxiety and guilt. It engenders timidity towards authority and binds children to their parents. This results in adult subservience to state authority and to capitalistic exploitation. It paralyzes the intellectual critical powers of the oppressed masses because it consumes the greater part of biological energy. Finally, it paralyzes the resolute development of creative forces and renders impossible the achievement of all aspirations for human freedom. In this way, the prevailing economic system, in which single individuals can easily rule entire masses, becomes rooted in the psychic structures of the oppressed themselves. What Reich was showing in this powerful quote is that on a collective level, the suppression of a natural function, whether biological, spiritual, or emotional, will result in an abnormal reaction, a psychic disease. This illness or disease is reflected into the masses through a collective unconscious and acts as an epidemic. Humanity is plagued with an incapacity for freedom, meaning that people en masse lack the ability to govern themselves on a psychic level, and this manifests in the macrocosm as government and organized religious powers, thus opening the throne, our national and individual throne, to anyone and anything. Enter the infamous rulers of the earth, the patriarchs of civilization, political, social, economic, and spiritual dictatorship, psychic tyranny. This simple illness within our psyche, this lack of responsibility and neglect of basic human freedom, has made way for every tyrant that has ever held rule over people on this planet.
And here, this is another one from Ungripped, which was also done by the Stewart brothers who did Kymatica.
It was November of '07 when I actually got pulled over by city police. You know, they had 2 or 3 police cars there, but what essentially happened is he came up to the window and said, you know, asked me for my driver's license, insurance, and registration. And I actually told him, well, I don't have a driver's license. And he goes, yeah, that's why I stopped you. I'm not a corporation, and I do know that I'm not here to submit to other people's authority. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was actually testifying to him. I didn't need to tell him that I didn't have any of those documents. At that point, he then asked me, well, what's your name? Well, I told him, well, my friends call me Rob. I don't let a name define me, or I don't let a career define me. I'm not a name or a label. Again, I was testifying. I didn't have to disclose to him my identity, but it was enough information for him to make the link between that name and the name that he has jurisdiction over, which is the artificial person that was on the driver's license that was expired. And that was grounds enough for him to proceed with filing charges of driving without a driver's license. And he essentially gave me a count of 3 to accept these, or he would continue filing more charges and tow the vehicle. And I finally accepted under, you know, I was extremely stressed out at that point because I didn't want to lose my property and that kind of stuff. So I accepted them and decided to deal with it through letters. Like if I was a judge, for example, and you walked in and claimed that you're sovereign, one of the things I'm going to look at is, okay, does this guy behave like a sovereign? Did he, you know, provide me with pre-notice and, you know, try to resolve the issue before it even came to court? And was he honorable in his communications and his interactions with people? So at that point I started a letter campaign, writing letters to him to ask him, you know, for proof of claim of a whole bunch of things that he was claiming over me, and he essentially ignored all of those. So I showed up in court for the plea. Okay, now I know what the plea is all about, right? So I didn't go in there with all my books. I essentially went in there to essentially say, you know what, there is no harm done here. There's no cause for this court to be hearing. The judge wouldn't hear any of that. He kept asking me for the person, Robert Ernest Page, and I kept saying, well, I'm here on this behalf, because I'm not that person. I'm man. But he finally said to me, okay, you know what, I'm entering in a plea. Well, first off, that was probably a no-no on his part.
And he told me to plead guilty. But he said that from the facts of the case, it didn't look like I had a chance.
Then he told me, make sure that that person is in court. You know, I was still nervous, I was still shaken and that kind of stuff, but I left court excited because I successfully got the judge to recognize me for who I am, not as that artificial person. But I still have court to deal with. So when I got there, the Crown called me up, so I went up there. This was before the judge was there. And he asked me for my name. I didn't give him a name. I told him I'm a third-party intervener under injury, because the artificial person's being called to court, not me. But I'm the one that was injured. I was stopped, which is an injury, detained for an hour and a half, and had to go through a whole bunch of letters and that kind of stuff. So he pointed to the ticket and then goes, well, is that you? And I told him, that is not me. And I think he's getting frustrated. He said, go sit down. So I went and sat down. All I know is that when they resumed court, they heard the rest of the cases, and then they called Robert Ernest Page up, and I stood up, and she turned to me and said, case dismissed on lack of evidence.
I move for an immediate dismissal. There's no sound basis for this case. There's not the slightest evidence.
That was tremendous feather in my cap, because I was able to successfully stand as a man in front of them without them intimidating me, and let them know that I know how this game works now.
So that Rob of the Page family. So you can't just say, I'm not the person. You have to know down to your marrow that you're not the person. Okay, I just have one more slide for you. You're done with this.
But couldn't he have been indicted, or when he called his name and he stood up, then he did acknowledge who he was?
If there had been an order, then he would have been putting himself under the jurisdiction, but they just called his name, and he stood up because he was there to deal with that case as the executor of the...
So because it wasn't an order, and because I thought, then they called his name, and then he stood up, then that would be identifying.
They knew that they were... You notice that they waited till the end of the day. They let all the other cases. When you are a problem, I mean, among other things, the cop that stopped him, like he said, the cop stopped him because he knew he didn't have a driver's license. He had already told the police that he wasn't going to have a driver's permit. Incidentally, a driver's license is a license to operate a commercial vehicle. A passenger is somebody who's paying for transport. You are only under the vehicle code if you are a commercial operator. And that is in plain English. It's clear as day in the California vehicle code. So I hope this has given you a little bit of a taste.
But then they're a terrorist.
Well, yeah. Well, we're all enemies.
Yeah.
They had a thing called the Trading with the Enemies Act, which was passed in 1914. It's been amended since then. And in this act, they turned it around and they made the population of the country the enemies. That is to say, the ordinary people are the enemy of this society, who are the dominant members, who are bent toward being dominant and maintaining and extending their dominance. Okay, so as 2012 unfolds, people are going to be waking up. This is going on very rapidly right now. There's so much stress, and there's also so much information because of the internet in particular, that things are changing very quickly. The globalist agenda is certainly accelerating the but then so is our perception of what the game is, and more particularly of who we are. Though we seem to be facing multiple threats, when we reach the upcoming tipping point, all bets are off. We do not know what is coming. We project out of the past onto what is coming. We project all kinds of dire images of warfare, of concentration camps, of tyrants throughout history, of floods and famine. But we don't know what's coming. It's quite possible that there's a social organization potential which can work so much better than what's going on currently that we have no idea about it. This awakening is what really terrorizes the powers that be. And in fact, Zbigniew Brzezinski, who they showed a picture of him, he looks like Emperor Palpatine. Brzezinski has been going around for almost the last 10 years and talking to anybody who'll listen, which is a lot of people because he's a dominant character, about what he calls the global political awakening. Well, they know it's not a political awakening, it's an awakening. But they classify it as a political awakening, and what they've done in the so-called Arab Spring, what they did in Libya, what they're doing in Syria now, and what is coming here with the economic collapse, which is on its way. And I hope you have strong hearts and are prepared, because we're going to be challenged. It's an awakening that has the potential for completely changing the way we operate as members of a society. So thank you very much for listening. We're going to have a brief update on smart meters from Don DeGasco, and then we'll take a brief break, and then we're going to have a Q&A if you want to remain for that.
I just have one question, and maybe you can expand on it. What happens when they take away habeas corpus?
Well, they already took it away, and I would really like to dig into that in the Q&A if you can wait.
Okay.